Behind the Mirror of Music with Dannii Cohen.
Hello and welcome to Behind the Mirror of Music. My name is Dannii Cohen. This week's guest is Kim Criswell. Kim Criswell is known for her work on Broadway and West End, as well as her concert performances around the world. Kim starred in the original Broadway cast of Nine and Baby and performed the role of Grizabella in the original Los Angeles cast of Cats. Next to these, she starred in Jesus Christ Superstar, Carrie, Kismet, Side by Sondheim, the Threepenny Opera with Sting, Candide, Annie Get Your Gun, Into the Woods, and much more. I hope you will enjoy the show.
Anyway, so let's get down to business. Hello, Dannii. Nice to meet you.
Hi. Nice to meet you too. It's such a joy you're joining us.
Well, yeah, it'll be fun. You've had some interesting artists on there. I mean, I think it's a hoot that you just recently interviewed my friend Jonathan Rocksmith, because I just met him this spring. We were in South Africa doing concerts, and he was there, and I just think he's adorable and just so talented, incredible.
Yeah, he is. He's such a lovely guy too, and knows such a lot about the history of theater and recent developments, and he's so fast.
Oh yeah, he's very quick. He knows enough to be 75 years old, but he's not even 40 yet. So it's amazing how much he knows considering how old he is.
Yeah, I mean, when I interviewed him, he said such a lot of stuff, and then I looked at the time, and it was only been half an hour, and he had been through the whole interview and told me many things in just that short of time.
Yeah, well, he's a walking encyclopedia of musical theater. I mean, he just has decided that that's what he's going to be interested in, and he's excellent. He's an excellent
Yes.
performer, so he's in the right business for sure. He's amazing. He's not like just everybody. He's really special.
I think he's one of those old soul types.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's also a jack of all trades. I mean, he plays the piano amazingly well. He sings amazingly well. He's a wonderful actor. He can sit down and write orchestrations. Things like that you just go, well, not many of us do that. It's quite astonishing what he's managed to do with his musical talents.
Yes, and he is for the most self-trained as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. I'm trying to cook up a plan where he and I can do something here in London together, but he's very busy on his world tour. But I would like to cook up something for the two of us. It'd be fun.
What are you doing right now in your life and career?
What I'm doing at the moment is putting together a club act for next Thursday night. So, a week, just under a week, with a new pianist. His name is James Church, and I haven't worked with him before. I've rehearsed with him once and thought, this guy's really rather good. He's quite good. So I think the sky's the limit. We can do whatever we want because he's capable of playing anything I can throw at him. So we're putting that together for next Thursday. It's just a lot of secretarial admin of scanning music and sending it and making a running order and figuring out, chat and lengths of things. There's a whole lot of that that's just kind of secretarial. And then somewhere in there I'll have to learn it. Oh, that. It's mostly things that I've done enough times that it's not really a struggle to remember them.
How did you fall in love with music and theater?
Honestly, I blame Julie Andrews. I think there's a lot of us that can say that. I grew up in Tennessee, Chattanooga. Well, I was born in Virginia, but most of my childhood was spent in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And there weren't many people interested in musical theater around me there because it's not really very common there. But when I was very young, I saw the Sound of Music movie and I saw the Mary Poppins movie, and I became obsessed with Julie Andrews and I wanted to sing just like her. So I, started imitating her, and I was singing publicly from about 5 years old. So my mother popped me on a box in church, stood me up on a box in church to sing Ave Maria in Latin. Who does that when they're 5? But I did. And I just always wanted to do musical theater, and I remember being, I don't know, 12 or 13 years old, and people saying, "What do you want to be when you grow up? What are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm going to be a Broadway singer. I'm going to be a Broadway performer." And they went, "No, you won't. You'll be No, you won't." And I was just, "No, everybody comes from somewhere. They got to come from somewhere. Why can't it be me? Why shouldn't it
Yeah.
be me?" And so that's what I did. That's what I aimed at, and that's exactly what I ended up doing.
What was your first professional show?
Well, if you count professional as being paid to do a job, I was hired at 15 to be in the stage show at Six Flags Over Georgia, which is a theme park in Atlanta. And normally they're college age kids, but this one year they had an experiment of using younger people. And so I was first paid to be a professional singer at 15 years old at Six Flags. And then from then on, I was hired at Six Flags pretty much every year. And then I went off to college at Cincinnati Conservatory and majored in musical theater. And by the time you get through 4 years of that, you are ready to go to New York. And one of the crucial things is that if you do that, you have a whole network of friends who are already in New York from the years above you. And so you don't feel like you're going to a strange place and not knowing anybody, because you do know somebody. You know lots of friends.
Yes.
So, and all those friends, I mean, that network of CCM friends still around me. They're still, and although I live in London, but I was just back in August and went to a birthday party for one of the people who was a junior when I was a freshman. Yeah, he's 2 years ahead of us. And he was having a big birthday and he threw himself a big party, and it was a CCM reunion. It really was amazing. His name's Jimmy Walton. Is that a name you know? Jim Walton?
Yes.
Because he was in the original Merrily We Roll Along playing Franklin Shepherd,
Yes.
and lots of other things too. But he's he goes way back to CCM with me, just like so many others that ended up doing Broadway stuff.
So cool that you keep in touch for all these years.
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, some of us, I mean, we've always stayed in touch, all of us, but there's a little group of us CCMers who, when COVID hit, we were all so isolated and stuck. We just decided to have a little Zoom conference group where we would just get together every few weeks and just catch up with each other in a Zoom call. And man, it was some of the best fun. Like, we just laughed and laughed and laughed. And boy, was that a time when we needed laughter, because everybody was so desperate and fed up. And, nobody knew when or if the business was ever going to come back. So we kept each other entertained, and that really cemented our friendships in a new way, which is and still going on. It's great.
But a strange thing of COVID that did some good in some ways, like
Yeah,
yeah, some strange ways.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that was certainly a good thing to come out of it. Although, I can't think of many others. It was really pretty terrible all around from my memory.
Yeah, I think the mostly the kind of thing that people started doing online that still continue today. That makes some theater things accessible to people in some way.
Yeah, well, it made the world a lot smaller because the
Yes.
technology caught up to it and got to the point where it is now, where we can just like Zoom each other. Because, I wasn't used to video calling people. I just wasn't in the habit, even though I'd had an iPhone for 100,000 years, but I just didn't really use it that way. So, Zoom. Hello, Zoom. We're on you right now. You've done very well out of this COVID thing, I'd say.
Someone said once, I think it was secretly invented for some moment like this all along.
Well, exactly. And I've had to do things that weren't so easy on Zoom, like teach voice lessons, because I had a little gaggle of students that Temple University had sent over to me for a course they were doing over here. And they had to go home in the middle of the term, but I had to finish it. So I had to do Zoom voice lessons, which is not ideal. It's not the best way to do a voice lesson. You should be in the same room. So, but it was functional just for what we needed to do. And yeah, we've all learned a lot of new tricks. Some of it is not good because I think the business end of things has gotten lazier in terms of the entertainment business because they're now getting to the point where they go, we don't really feel like renting a room and paying an audition pianist. So just make them do a video of them singing the song. And you go, I don't want to do that. That's stupid. I don't want to play the piano. I don't want to, and for them to assume that I can sort of, but not well enough for anybody to be impressed with it, I promise. So they've gotten lazy like that. They want to lean on the technology instead of actually putting out the effort on their end to see people in a room. Because anybody who's been in the business a long time, and Lord knows I have, knows that the chemistry, the connection that you make with the creative team is in the room. It doesn't happen over a Zoom call or over a videotaped audition. So it's frustrating that so many of them are in my opinion, lazy enough to do things that way. It's much better to be in the room because I think you have a much better shot of getting a sense of who is evaluating you for possibly hiring you, and see if you get along, because it's not just a one-way street, it's two ways. You need to like them too. It's not just, oh, can they please like me? You need to like them too, or else you can be in for a long unpleasant journey if they're people you don't like. So it's much better to do all those things in the old-fashioned way, I think.
Well, I kind of think they should be able to do both. That people who were, for some reason, can't make it a day or live too far away, mostly like teenagers or something, that they could send in stuff. But that,
Yeah.
but people are,
Sometimes
yes,
they do that, and
yes,
sometimes, I mean, I think ideally, if someone cannot physically be there, but you want to consider them, that
yes.
should be an option. I just had to cancel an audition for Tuesday because they wanted me to. Tuesday's my big rehearsal day for this thing I'm doing next week, and they wanted me to be in an audition in a rather far flung part of town in the middle of my rehearsal time, and I was like, no, I can't do it, no. And then they wanted me to come at something like 9 in the morning, and I went, no, I'm not doing that either. I'm going to focus on my own show that day, not on yours. But I'm happy to do it at another time. I just can't do it that day. Absolutely not.
I mean, and then you could send in a video first, and then they could still work with you for the second edition or something like that.
Well, like I said, I don't like sending in videos, but I did tell my agent to
Yeah.
offer that I would try to do that, but I probably wouldn't do it before Friday. So, and guess what? The show's months away. It's not like they have to have an answer tomorrow morning. They don't. So there should always be a flexibility. If they're really interested in you, there should be some flexibility, because they just go randomly, this day is the day that we're making our choices. And you kind of go, yeah, but what if I can't make that day? People have lives.
I think it's strange that these days companies want to promote stuff that's like 2 years away sometimes.
Oh, I know. Well, that happens a lot. Not so much with casting of musical theater, but it happens in opera. My agent recently got a call about, I mean, some production of Follies somewhere, I can't where, which is 2 years away. And I just said, I have no idea. And what are they doing trying to cast Follies so far in advance? Because yes, I know it's an opera company and that's how they think, but Follies is full of old people. So they might be dead in 2 years. You don't know. Don't cast somebody now for that. You need to actually know that they're alive and well and compos mentis, and that they can walk and dance and sing, and act. Yeah, there are no guarantees once you get into these shows that feature older people.
Here where I live, they're announcing a show. They did it in July for Christmas 2026. I think, why?
I know. Well, when my agent asked me about this volley, well, I don't know. I don't know if I'm planning to be alive, but I don't know if I want to do that. I have no idea. It's far away.
You might have something else come up by then.
Yeah, exactly. And you never know. That's the thing. Because
Yeah.
I mean, and that is what is so weird about my career, certainly as I came to Europe, which was in 1992, has been with one foot in the sort of music semi-classical, but not really classical. I'm always singing musical theater, but sometimes it's in a classical venue like La Scala or someplace like that. But the other side is the theater side, which, those things cast a month before they start or 2 months before they start, but they don't cast years in advance. So you don't know, I don't want to be committed to something 2 years in advance that I can't get out of in case something better turns up in a normal theater time frame, which is 2-3 months in advance. Then you can have a pretty good idea of whether you will be in shape to do it and want to do it, and that always matters. Life has a way of going on, whether we try to make plans or not, with theater schedules, and it's silly to plan too far in advance, I think.
I think so too. It's just really, really strange. I think it happened recently more than it was in the past.
Yeah, it's much. I'm certainly much more used to the theatrical way of thinking and of doing shows, because also in the opera world, you're supposed to turn up day one completely off book, meaning knowing every line and knowing every song. Now, I turn up fairly prepared and I read music, so it's not very hard for me to musically get through it. But for them to expect you to have all of it memorized leaves out a really crucial part of the learning process, which is the repetitions in the rehearsal room. That's how you embed it in your brain. Meaning, if you're trying to learn, if you're trying to sing "You're the Top," one of those Cole Porter has 5,000 verses, and how do you know which one's after which? Well, your body remembers it from the choreography, but trying to learn it as two separate things takes that learning thing away. So, and heaven forbid anybody should change anything, because you can't change. Once you've embedded it already in there, it's hard to change it. So I think the theatrical way is much more sensible. Of you kind of learn it on your feet. You block the show, you block the songs, you learn your choreography, and you learn it all at the same time. So it all goes into the body computer in one clump, as opposed to three different categories and parts of the brain. It's hard to make them link up sometimes.
I heard a director say that he doesn't want the actors to have even read the script before they come to the rehearsal room, because he wants them to learn with him, because he might he doesn't want to have them thought of things, nothing. It's completely blank.
Well, yeah, and directors, they often want that kind of control, and they want to put their thumbprints all over the thing.
Yes.
And they can't do that if it's already embedded in you in a really permanent way. It's very hard to change people that have already learned something, well, down to bedrock. It's very hard. So I understand that objection from a director, but opera directors, the opposite. They're mad at you not off book on day 3, and you kind of go, I'm from the theater. We don't do it that way. This will work out. Be there in time. There, but I'm going to need to carry the script until I am really secure, because guess what? If I'm carrying the script, I can write down blocking, and then I can remember it when I go back at the end of the day. I can review it, so that if anything to write on, you can't, you forget a lot. So much better to go do the theater way. I agree with that director. Not necessarily don't read the script, because often when you're considering whether you want to do a show, because if, okay, you audition for it, they say they want you. If you haven't read a script, you don't know what you're saying yes to. And that can be bad. That isn't always great. You're not always happy with what you get if you haven't read it.
I
So
think that's a weird way of thinking when you're doing shows that might have been performed before, where there are videos online or whatever.
yeah. Well,
But might
certainly
have
if
been.
there's, if it's something, if it's, Guys and Dolls or Oklahoma or a piece that's really well known, you can get a hold of a script yourself. They don't have
Yes.
to send you one. But if it's a new piece and they want you for a certain role, if you don't read the role, you don't know what you're saying yes to.
Absolutely, because they could just put a description, but what happens to the character the rest of the way?
Well, here's an example. I was in the original Broadway company of Nine, the
Yes.
musical best musical from 1982. And I auditioned for it, not knowing anything much about it. I was in another Broadway show that was closing just before it, so I was like in a whole kerfuffle of another show. And I went to this audition, didn't really know what it was for because I had missed all the main auditions. I'd heard nothing about it. I was busy being in another world because when you're in a Broadway show that's in previews and opening, you eat, sleep, and breathe it. You don't even sleep at night because you just go home at the end of the rehearsal day and get up in the morning and go back. And so you don't talk to your parents, you don't talk to your boyfriend, you don't talk to your best friend, you don't talk to anybody. You just go back and forth to work and you're in a bubble. So this other thing came up, that one was unfortunately not a hit and it was closing. So I went to this bizarre audition for Nine, and I didn't know anything about it. And I'd never seen the Fellini film 8 1/2. I think maybe I knew that's what it was based on, but I hadn't seen it, so I didn't know it. And that I all I knew was that they want you to wear black and sing a song in a foreign language. I'm like, really? Why? So the only thing I knew was Quantum and Vo that I could sort of fake my way through. And even that I was grumpy about. I was holding music going, I'm gonna need to hold the music. Tommy Toon's like, yes, okay, that's fine. So anyway, I ended up getting cast out of that audition, and the rest of the cast had already been cast. I think I was a last minute replacement because they had it all set and then somebody dropped out. So I took that slot. And I didn't know what I was being asked to do. Now, it was early days in my career, so I didn't, it wouldn't have mattered what it was. I was going to say yes, it was a Broadway show, but it was a workshop first. So we did the workshop, and we all had meetings with Tommy Toon, individual one-on-one meetings. We went to his apartment and sat around, and he told us about his concepts and what he wanted to do with the show and this and that and other. He kind of said, at any point, any of these women could step forward and tell her story. It's just, you come up with some creative things of your relationship with Guido Contini and how it's different from everybody else's and why your story should be told. And I thought, well, this is interesting. This thing doesn't have much of a form at all. Okay, I'll go in and compete like that. So got to the first day of rehearsal, and everybody was sitting in their little chairs as we got around the piano, and Maury Essen proceeds to pull a higher score and make us sight read through, which was very interesting because not many people did. Not many people could. There were a lot of tape recorders coming out. And it's not easy music. It's complicated.
Absolutely.
Very, very complicated. A lot of choral singing and 4-part harmonies and things like that. Anyway, I started to notice, it wasn't until then that I started to notice, hang on a minute, that person is a character and she has a song. I didn't know about this part. So it wasn't as unstructured as I had assumed. It was a lot less structured. It was a lot more structured than I'd thought. No, the principals were cast to be principals. And the rest of us, we all signed contracts that said as cast. And essentially you couldn't make yourself a principal in that show unless you already were a principal. So that's the last time I signed a contract that said as cast. It's important to know what you're signing up for. I wouldn't have turned it down anyway. I was in no position to do that. I was just beginning in New York. So I would have of course done it, but I wouldn't have been so confused about what I was signing up for. And it was a great experience, and it was certainly great to be in a great big hit, but it was quite eye-opening to really know nothing about it before it started. I mean, and honestly, with a new show, that's often the case. You don't have any idea.
What's the whole experience like for you in Nine itself? You were Francesca and then came Claudia.
Yes, Francesca was just one of the Italian, because the women in the ensemble are either Italians or Germans, or their principals. So, yeah, and the Italians were the chambermaids and the people that worked in the spa in Venice or in the hotel, and the were visiting German tourists, and everybody, it was Toon's big concept was to do, because it had been written to be done by a mixed gender cast, but Toon had said, nope, I want it to be all women except for Guido Contini. So that was a big change that he made. So even the gondolier was a woman. And we're singing male lyrics, but it's a woman going, "I'm the gondolier, haha," all that kind of stuff. So um, it was very fantastical and interesting. And I remember asking him once why we were doing something a certain way. He said, "I don't know. It's Fellini." It's like, what? But you're supposed to know. But it was just so freeform. And Arthur Kopit would come up and hand you a little 3x5 index card with a line on it and say, "That's your line in this sequence." You never knew what anybody else's lines were. There was no script until we got to the end of it was really being created under us. A lot of it, the score was there, but there was an awful lot of it that was being done as we went, and it was fascinating. It was frustrating, fascinating, hugely competitive, which they set it up like that, going, "I want you to all compete for Guido Contini," which does not bring out the best in 21 women.
No.
So there was definitely some unpleasantness about that aspect of it. But so going from being Francesca, who was basically, I was in the chorus, but I was the cover for Claudia Nardi, and I was the cover for Carla. So for Anita Morris and Shelley Birch, I was their understudy. And that caused a little bit of, not everybody liked that. They would have preferred that they were the understudy, I'm sure, some of them. But so we weren't, it just was an interesting group of personalities, and particularly since they had made it deliberately competitive between us. So taking over Claudia, I did it. The producer didn't want me. Tommy Toon did want me. Tommy got his way, but the producer proceeded to torture me a lot along the way and made me sign a contract that was just insulting. So I took over on a Monday, and I gave my notice 4 days later. So I played it for 5 weeks, and then I left. But that was, a year in. I had already done it for 9 months in, or something like that. 9 months to a year in. So I learned an enormous amount on that show. I learned how to be company. I learned how to behave and how not to behave. The Raul Julia, who was Guido, was the best role model I have ever found in the theater for how to behave. And we all adored him. He was such an amazingly great guy. But he also was a leading man star, and he knew how to handle that too. He knew how to handle all of it. He was incredibly gracious. The first time I was thrown on for Carla, I didn't even have a costume. We had to go shopping in like some of the prostitute shops in Times Square to get me a costume. William Ivy Long and I were in there just like buying lingerie in one of the shops that is long since gone, because it was a very hookery shop. Just so I'd have something particular to wear for her big cough in the Vatican number. And but I couldn't do any of the choreography in it, because if I had stood on my head like she did in that number, my boobs would have fallen out on the floor, because it was not a stage-worthy costume that was going to actually work for the choreography. So I had to make up the choreography as I went along, and take out the bits that would have put me into a costume problem. So it was just a white knuckle ride. I'm glad that happened to me when I was so young, because I didn't have any sense of fear. I don't know why I didn't, but I didn't. I think if I had been older, I would have had sense enough to be scared to go on and do that. But I was like, "Oh yeah, bring it on. I'll do it." So, I went on for both of them. I went on I think 14 times for Anita and 18 times for Shelley, and then I took over for Shelley as Claudia. So I got a good run at both of them a little bit. And I learned a lot.
It's amazing to hear that the show was created like that, because as it's still run, you didn't think it was really scripted from the start. It's such a story.
No, there were different versions of the script, but the one we ended up with was Arthur. I don't think Arthur Kopit was part of it previous to the workshop, or if he was a new addition. There was a script by Mario Ferrati before that they didn't end up using. So when you base something on a Fellini film, it's going to be all bizarre stuff anyway.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, what's your take on this bizarre storytelling thing? What style are we going after? And then that's what Arthur was dealing with, and of course he was known for writing sort of out there kind of things anyway. So he was a good match for it, I think.
Absolutely. And they continue to work together for a while, he and Mariette, so
Yeah, yeah,
worked
they
well for
did.
them.
They did. They absolutely did. No, I mean he's a good guy. It's quite interesting because I hadn't been out of college for terribly long. I think I'd been out of college for 3 years, maybe, when this was going on. And I was like, I studied all these people in college. Whoa, that's interesting. Because of course I got to know them because I was working with them. Yeah, I didn't have sense enough to have fear at that time of my life. Just as well, probably.
What are some of your favorite roles through the years?
Um, Well, my favorite role is generally one that I'm just doing now. But oh, I've had great opportunities doing kind of great roles. I mean, I was the original Grizabella in Los Angeles in that Cats company. And, I really wanted to sing that song. I really wanted to do it. And I talked them into letting me do it somehow or other in the auditions. Once again, doing outlandish things that were a little bit, a little bit should have been, I should have had sense enough to not do that. But then again, I wouldn't have got the role. Um, you know, I had to like push them to let me sing the song because they were about to cast me in a different role or they were considering me for a different role. And I was like, no, 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 no. You're going to need an understudy. So let me sing it because this is actually what I do. That isn't what I do. This is what I do. And obviously, eventually they agreed with me. So that was great. I did that for a year and a half and it was great fun. And it was the first time in my life, because I was in my mid 20s. It's the first time in my life that I had been the person who's in the dressing room that, when people come to the show and they come back afterwards to meet anybody in the cast, they come to your dressing room door. Well, they didn't come to my door in nine. I was in the chorus. But they did in Cats, and it was freaky because it was in LA. So the people that would be knocking on my door were film stars. And I was like, wait, that's Sammy Davis Jr.
That is
Oh dear. That's one of the people that came to my door more than once. He saw it more than once, he and Altavis. And that level of people, it was just incredible to do it out there because it was the first outing for that show out there, and so it was a hot ticket and everybody wanted to see it. And it was a great opportunity. Would I say it's one of the greatest roles I've ever played? Well, no, it's not. It's a cat review. It's really not. It's not Ibsen. It's not something like that. But it was fun. And I took it very seriously. I had to be the most human of them and sing the song that was supposed to move people. And I took it very seriously and I was quite serious about it. And I didn't miss a single show. I did not call in sick one time. I took 2 1-week vacations and I took one night off because the Schuberts asked me to be in Elizabeth Taylor's very first AIDS benefit. So I went and sang memory in that. But other than that, I was there every day. So, you know, I based my behavior on what I had just learned from Raul Julia about how to behave in a company and how to not make an ass of yourself or make enemies. I just, yeah, there's a way to do it. There's a way to be gracious and still be strong and be heard and seen, but you don't have to be a jerk and you shouldn't have enemies in the show.
true.
You shouldn't, although many people do in different shows. And certainly the older I get, the harder it is to not have enemies in the show because sometimes there's somebody that you go, oy, oy, oy. In the real world, this would not be my choice of a person to hang out with. So, no, that was kind of great. I mean, I did 5 Broadway shows. Another one that was an incredible one to do, although it wasn't particularly a hit, was the Threepenny Opera production that starred Sting. I was Lucy. I mean, we all made friends with Sting. It was so cool. And he's a great guy. He's actually another person who is a good example of how to behave. He's a very, very nice, well, nice is a bland word for him. Um, he's a very warm and friendly and intelligent and talented person who is not a prima donna. He wanted to do everything the way we do it. So when we started the show, nobody had microphones. We were all singing it acoustic, which of course that show was originally done acoustically. But
Yes.
what they found out that I've since learned, I've learned because of doing so many recordings and things with people like John McGlynn, the style of orchestration for those shows in the old days when there weren't orchestra or weren't microphones was very, very different than it is now. You never ever in a 1930s show had to sing over anything but woodwinds and strings. You never sang over brass. You never sang over percussion. So they were orchestrated so the voice could be heard on top. And nowadays everybody's playing everything all at once. So you couldn't cut across it without a microphone. So mistake they made with our Threepenny Opera, we went to Washington, D.C. to try out at the National Theater there. And they had made the mistake of putting the set, having a two-tiered set that had the orchestra on the set instead of in a pit.
Oh.
So that sound was topping ours, and it was, no, we all sang, we did our best to sing over it, but they added mics. They needed to. And Sting was very much like, I don't want a mic if nobody else is having one. I'll do it without a mic and I'll do it. They needed to add at one added mics for some people, but not for me. Please give me a mic. I need one too. Because they said, oh no, you can be heard and Georgia Brown can be heard, but other people are getting lost. And I said, you can't have some of us mic'd and some of us not. You can't. You've got to give everybody a mic.
Yes.
You don't have to turn me up as loud, but if that's the case. And honestly, that is what Maureen McGovern was playing Polly, and she stripped her gears having to scream over that orchestra to the point where she had to miss the Broadway opening because she was on vocal rest because she did some damage. I think she ended up with a bleeding vocal cord or something like that. She had to just be on silence for quite a while. So, they should have known, they should have consulted with someone who knew the difference. And because if the orchestra in a pit, it would have been possible, but not with them on stage in our heads. And I had to fight that fight once years later because there was a production at Opera of Anything Goes that they asked me to be because I had recorded, and they wanted to use the original orchestrations, which were over acoustically without mics. But then they kept trying to put the orchestra on stage. And I just said, no, cannot. That will, do you want to have to add mics at the very last minute and extra thousands, however many thousand that you weren't planning on? Or will you just me, have this on very good authority? The acoustic needs to sing for it. You need them in a pit. They cannot be on stage. That ruins the acoustic, makes it possible. And so my way. But I'd done 2 shows with Jonathan Tunick, and we'd even been out on some dates, so we were good friends. And I got orchestration from him. There aren't many better than Jonathan Tunick. I can't think of any. I mean, he's the most famous of all the day orchestrators, and with good reason. And so I learned from him. I learned from John McGlynn because he really knew the differences. He had really studied all of this before he made that series of recordings. He had really studied up on all of it. And so, trying to get the authentic sound for the original Showboat or the original Anything Goes or the original Annie Get Your Gun, that's what made him successful, was because he was doing something different that was authentic.
And I love that they want to bring back the old sound because so many people haven't heard that because it's so long ago.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he had put shows back together that were from the 1920s. Well, nobody has heard those shows. Nobody was around then to listen to them, when they were first happening. And honestly, in that time, for instance, the original cast of Girl Crazy, the 2 stars were Ginger Rogers and Ethel Merman. And according to all reports, the reason, I mean, Ethel Merman was an overnight star just because she walked out and hollered out, I got rhythm, and a star was born. But it was mainly because they could hear her. They could hear her. Whereas
Yes.
Ginger Rogers was lovely and all of that, but you couldn't hear her. She was, it was before her Hollywood years. So it was one of her first things that she did. And in the film, she was showcased spectacularly because she was mic'd. Everybody was mic'd in a film. But her Broadway career was a little bit challenged by the fact that she didn't have a big loud voice.
Yeah, recently someone put some old flyers on a website, and it listed Ginger Rogers well, and there was one person, Ginger Rogers on mic? How the heck did they hear her?
Yeah, they didn't. They didn't. It's the story. Well, that's what I've always been told is that introduced you. I don't think anybody ever heard it. I mean, it wasn't just it was a duet. So I can't say opposite her, but and that original version, very funny to go back to the original versions of these things because they're so different. Everybody Traceable You is this like smoochy ballad, sexy thing now, and it was like literally and me, I sweet embrace you. It was a little two-step thing when they originally did. Whereas the opposite is true of I Get a Kick Out of You from Anything Goes. The first thing Merman sang, and it's done as a very, very like running water sort of ballad, not lugubrious, but just runnish, and no dotted rhythms, no swing, no jazz. Even though the pit was full of people like I don't know, big people who later went on to become big band jazz leader or band leaders. So very jazzy guy. There were like five in the pit, people who became famous later. And when the original version, which I'll be doing next Thursday, of I Get a Kick Out of You, they're knocked over by it. You can't even. It doesn't even seem like a song, but it's what he intended and what he wrote, what Cole originally wrote.
Strange how these things happen.
Yeah, well, when songs, because the difference between music and theater music was difference in that day. They would take songs from the musicals and turn them into pop hits. So in the nightclubs, you'd be hearing people do their take on these famous songs. And that's when, the jazzing up kind of stuff started to happen because people would do their own version. And the writers are like, yeah, I make more money no matter which version it is. I don't care. Just sing it. Please sing it. So there were lots and lots and lots of different versions. And then the sort of Frank Sinatras of the world came along and, always jazz things up. So it's very interesting to go back to those originals. And I think we're really lucky that the John McGlynn's of the world, there are a few people that were doing that, but he ended up being the one that became the most known for it, I think. Because they went back and restored things to how they were originally heard. And it's really astonishing because without that, we've got recordings of people, doing that. I had to be taught singing that style. Since I was like every other person, I'd been listening to pop music my whole life. And so I would do poppy things like straight and scooping and various things. And he's like, nope, and no back phrasing, sing on the beat, sing the note values he wrote with vibrato all the time. And that is how they sang.
Yes.
So it makes a big difference when you're hearing those songs sung in the as opposed to how somebody might do a take on them now.
He did full recordings of shows for J Records as well, I believe.
Oh, many, many, many for John. Yeah. And those, that has happened since I moved to the UK because I came in 92 to do Annie Get Your Gun and stayed. And I had a record deal at EMI at that point, but I also, John started asking me to do his things. And I thought, well, this is great. I love making records. It's one of my most favorite things to do, if not my very favorite thing. It might be my very favorite thing. And, he takes a lot of pride in having put out complete recordings of a lot of the classic musical theater pieces, meaning every note of music. And the other conductor that I've been working with for the past, I don't know, 15 years or so, is John Wilson, who has done the exact same thing with the film songbook. So whenever we go out and do a concert, if I'm singing The Man I Love or The Man That Got Away, I'm singing it in Judy Garland's arrangement and her key, and styled after her version. Same thing with if I'm doing Don't Rain on My Parade, it is the version. It's it's incredible to have that opportunity, because that was my fantasy when I was a kid. I would just watch these movies and go, I want to sing that, but I want to sing it just like that. I would want it to be smaller with just a piano, somebody doing something other. I want it to be exactly like that. And that's what I got. Be careful what you ask for, because you will get it. I got what I asked for. I really.
That's wonderful. And because these days what you say, they popify so many musicals. That's just sad to hear at times, because you're missing a lot of the essence now.
Well, yeah, and sometimes popifying something is fun. Like when I
Yes.
first got to New York, one of the shows that came up that I saw it more than once was the Pirates of Penzance version, the version that Joe Papp did. That was Kevin Kline and Linda Ronstadt and Rex Smith doing this old Gilbert and Sullivan stuff, and they sort of, they were doing it kind of faithfully, but a little bit pop, and it was fabulous. I went to see it about 4 times because I just loved it. So it's not like you can't ever go the other direction. You can. Sometimes it's fun to do that. But by and large, the when they redo something, like they're having a big hit out of Guys and Dolls here, a very mixed media. I mean, it's quite an interesting immersive production where some of the scenes take place in the audience, because there's a like a mosh pit of an audience where they actually go out in the audience for some of the scene work and doing things and numbers, and so that's fun. People are doing that. It's that show's been done so many ways, and it's always a hit no matter what way you do it.
Do you still have a dream role?
Oh, at this stage, I think it needs to be Gypsy. You think it's a Mama Rose time of my life. So I'd like to get to do that. There's a possibility that I'll record it, but we'll see. We'll see. And I'd love to do a production of it, but I just haven't done it yet. I haven't done it, and I would love to. That one really on there. Another one that I really like the look of and would love to have a good shot at is, did you see Kimberly Akimbo on Broadway?
Oh, yes.
Anything about that? Well, that's an older leading lady who needs to have a very young spirit, and but really be of the age that I am. So I'd love to do that one. I thought it was a fascinating piece, and so surprising, because it was not. I kind of thought it was going to be like an ABC after school special about a woman or a girl with a weird disease, and be tragic. And you guys don't know about ABC after school specials because you didn't grow up in America, but there were always these dramatic specials on TV after school. Like when the kids come home from school, you'd sit down, you'd be able to, and it'd always be about a boy in a bubble or something like that. That they're always tear jerkery things, but very uplifting. And I kind of thought it would be like that, and it isn't. They use so much imagination and heart than my assumption would have had them do it. So I think it's a great piece, great fun.
What were the biggest difference for you from working in America to working in the UK?
Well, there are differences. It is the same business, and it is in large part the same people, because if there's a big hit show on Broadway, sooner or later it'll come over here, and vice versa. So it's quite the same in that you're still going to be auditioning for many people, at least at the top of the tree. But I find that, well, because things are less expensive theatrically in England, a lot more going on in terms of trying new stuff out. So there are a lot more productions of things that are not necessarily full whack in the West End, big full money things. They'll develop things in regional theaters, and yes, they do that in America too, but it's so spread out in America. It's not. It's just doesn't seem to be as obvious. Like in London, you can go and see a workshop of something, and then you can go and see a fringe version of something, and then you can go and see a West End something, and it's pretty much all the same acting pool. The acting pool isn't so huge that it's not the same people. It's the same people. Whereas in America, the acting pool is so huge because it's so huge. You necessarily see the same people in a regional production as you would in the West End or in Broadway. But here you'd see the same people. So it is, I find one aspect of it is frustrating in that because I'm American, they will not consider me to play English. Just won't, which is silly. For 30
Yes.
years, I can do an English accent. I have here. I've heard plenty of English accents, but they just assume you can't. So the things that come my way tend to be American, which is or it'll be an English character that they'll say, no, she can be American. Let's be American, and I'm like, okay, I can do the other if you want, but like if in America, I would have played Mrs. Lovett 3 times by now, but not in England, not in England, because she's English, and so I find that frustrating. Though, am I allowed to say this? I'm not going to kill myself over not doing Sondheim. I went, I went to auditions for Sondheim when I was in New York. I ended up working with him, but I knew him pretty well. I was pretty, casual with him, and it just never worked out. And I realized that I don't have to do Sondheim to work. I don't have to do that material to work. And there's not much for once you get past Follies, there's not much left for women who are over 50. So
Still nice
it's
music, perhaps.
well, I mean, if you want to be Hermione Gingold sitting in a wheelchair going lessons, well, I have no interest in that. None. Just don't want to do that. Don't care. Don't care about that. This it's very different over here. The other thing that's been incredibly different is because over Europe, I'm on the doorstep of all of Europe. And so a huge amount of my work has been in other countries in Europe, like huge amounts in Italy, quite a bit in France, um, touring around concerts. I've done a huge amount of concert work, which is been extraordinary. But I'm always doing musical theater. I went to La Scala and did a recital of American musical theater. And then I came back years later and did a production of Candide. But it's always musical theater that I'm doing. And people go, oh, it's crossover. I'm not crossing anywhere. I'm staying in my lane, but my lane keeps going in a different direction. So it's been extraordinary because I've in Amsterdam I've sung in the concert at least 3 times, and always doing musical theater things. Once with John Wilson, we did some Bernstein there, and that is not what Broadway people do, not normally. So I've a really unique, diverse career that is like no one else. There's no even people who cross over a bit, like say Audra McDonald. Audra has done some concert stuff too. We did Wonderful Town together. She was my sister. We did it with the Berlin Philharmonic on New Year's Eve and recorded it and all kinds of things. But she hasn't had the concert career in Europe because she's not based in Europe. She's based in America. So the concert career she's having is mostly over there, I think. So there really just isn't anybody else who has a career like mine. Rebecca Kane is the closest. Do you know who Rebecca Kane is? Do you remember her from Les Mis, the original Cosette, but also one of the original Christine's in Phantom? So she and I are not the same thing, but we're friends and colleagues, and we did Of the I Sing together more than once, and we had great fun with that because I was the bad girl and she was the sweet. Hilarious. But it's weird to have one foot in each camp. It is, and she's an opera singer, but I'm just not. I didn't pay attention in opera singing class. I want to be an opera singer, so I wasn't, am not. Yet I end up in all these fancy venues like Concertgebouw or La Scala, or I've probably done. I don't even know if I've sung in 50 places in Italy, but I probably have. So many recitals and concerts and things. I've just done loads and loads, but and all over Europe. And going with with a concert thing that I used to do years ago called West End the concert, where we just kind of went all we'd play these big arenas in Stockholm, the Globen, we and just for thousands of people singing the typical West End stuff, all of the Les Mis, all of the Phantom, all that stuff, which is very different from a Broadway show, because a Broadway concert cabaret would be all different material. Those shows, yes, they're Broadway shows, but they're since they originated in the UK, it's two different very different concerts. But the American art form, there's a reason. I, I find a lot of the English creative people, in my opinion, don't respect the art form that is musical theater as much as they should, because there are a lot of directors that'll go, "Oh, it's a musical. That's easy. Anybody can do that." Actually, no, it's not easy. It's a specific has a specific set of rules and tried and true things that because if you've done a lot of it, what works and what doesn't. You know what the rules are. You know what conventions are accepted to tell this story and which ones it's it's a very thing, and there's a set of rules that should be respected more than they are, because British people go, oh, it doesn't matter, nobody's going to ask that question. Yeah, it does, because I'm the actor and I'm playing, and something I'm doing is an absolute lie within the context of the story we're telling, and nobody will notice that. Don't worry. It matters. I mean, being a decent actor, which doesn't always go with musical theater performing, but it should. Being a decent actor means you have to think in all the details that people think in life. You have to be that person, and you have to think of all the details that aren't even necessarily written down, but the detail needs to be right, and you need to come to an agreement as you're with your director and the other creative about that you are aligned on what is true for this character, which things are the truth. And and if there's something that seems like it's a great big lie, um, I think you're allowed to flag it up and go, hang on a minute. This actually doesn't explain to me why this is possible, knowing that I know this about this character. So, that's what rehearsal's for, is for you to work out all that stuff and get the backstories together. Because if you walk onto a stage to play a character and you haven't thought about their backstory, what was their childhood? What did they like their parents? All that stuff. If you don't actually do that homework, then it shows that you're playing somebody that isn't very well developed. And in musicals, you have even less time than you have in a play to present a fully rounded person in that character. So to use every bit of it, because, in a play, you might have a long moment. In a musical, you'll have a short scene and then you'll go into a song. And or other, you've got to get that same information across for that. So it's not simple as people would make. It is basically the British are much better at plays, straight plays, than Americans are. As a rule, I'm just making generalizations here. There are exceptions, of course. I think Americans are better at the musical theater genre because it's ours. We grow up doing it, all of us. Even big opera stars, Fleming. Well, she grew up doing doing the high school and playing whoever the lead was, like every other American performer. They went into opera instead, something else, and they might be, but if they had that talent, they did the junior high and the high school musicals, because that's a thing in America. It's not necessarily some in the UK.
If you wish to add anything to this interview that you want people to know that hasn't been said yet?
Well, listen, if you are a person that wants to do this for a living, just know that if there's anything else that you're torn about that would make you just as happy, do that, because you have to really have to do it, because it's tough, but it's so rewarding. It is very rewarding if you are successful. And the thing that I always tell my students is the part you're not going to realize for a lot of years probably is that the friends you're making as you're being are going to be the real bedrock part of your friendship group for your whole life. They're going to be the ones that you still know 50 years later, that you're in touch with, like my CCM friends. It's not been 50 years, but it's been, it's been a long time. And the that is a long way of saying people in the theater are rule very inclusive. Um, even if you are the weirdest kid in your junior high school, fit in the theater, because nobody fits in and everybody fits in. It's full of people like that, and a safe place for all of us to be. So the thing that you might spend your entire life on stage and doing these kinds of things. The thing at the end of it, if you're like anything like me, you revere the most is the people, because you get such great people, such fun people, such interesting people, such intelligent people. You make these wonderful friendships, and it's the people. Theater people are fun. They can be self-involved, sure, but you've got to have an ego or you can't do it at all. But it's the people make it worth it, because so many times you're in a terrible show, or you're in something where there's just, you look out there and all you see is, the proverbial two lesbians and an Afghan hound in the audience, meaning nobody's coming to it on a rainy afternoon somewhere. But and bowing, you always think, oh, it's going to be so glorious when I get to take a bow and people are clapping for me. You don't think about that when you're taking a bow. You think about how many beats you should be there, and how, you're going to shuffle off to the side in a minute, and am I going to catch the train? We ran a little long and the train is there's so many, there's life is involved in all of it. So you have to really love it, is the point. That is my parting words to anybody that is considering this as a way of making a living. It can be absolutely joyous. It also can be really horrible, because if a will kick you in the head, so often you'll just sit down and go, ah, that hurts. We've all had that over and over and over. You have to be made of pretty tough stuff. Pick it out. And it's okay if you don't. I know a lot of people that went through all the training and came to New York and tried and the other, and then they got married and have children and get on with a different side of their life. There's no wrong, there's no wrong. They made a choice that gave them something different, and there's nothing with that at all. So, you can combine it. You can combine having a theatrical life with having a family and kids, but it's hard. It's really hard, because the freedom to pick up and go where the job is tends to get less and less and less when you have dependent children, and you have, a husband who might also be an actor, and he's off on the road with something, and then you have to decide whose career is going to be served and which one is going to go on the back burner. This is all part of living your life, and you shouldn't miss any of it. But it's a big choice to make, to do this for a living. It's only possible for people who really must do it, because if you really must, you will.
Thank you so much for your lovely words and this lovely interview.
Well, you're very welcome. It's been nice talking to you.
Absolutely was. It was great to hear all these stories, because there's so many things I haven't heard yet. So,
Well,
yeah.
Lord knows there's lots of stories. People keep saying, "Oh, write a book," and I'm like, "For who? My mother? She's dead." Read it. Actually, there's stuff I couldn't if she was alive, so that's okay too. Yeah, no, I mean, everybody in the theater has just bags and bags and bags of stories, because so much stuff happens to us. It's great fun. It's fun. It's fun out of town, and be on the road and work on a show, and but having a real life does get in the way of it a little bit.
And just with a lot of shows, we don't know what went on backstage or how it was created. It's so amazing to hear that often it's totally different than what you'd expect.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I don't I don't know. People that have not been on the stage, and so they've not really done a show where they're sitting in a dressing room waiting for their cue. It's, there's a discipline to it. There's a discipline to it, and there's a fun to it, and there's a whole social thing to it. But it's hard to explain it to people who don't do it. It's, I think one of the main things is that you don't realize that people don't realize that you don't want to go do it every day, and yet you have to, because that's what you signed up for. So you don't feel like doing 8 shows a week most weeks. You might feel like doing 4, and then there'll be 2 where you're like, I can get there, and then there's 2 that's like, oh man. I mean, you have to get there for all of them. You have to do it. But you're not always desperate to go on the stage and strut your stuff. You're not always feeling great for that because you didn't get enough sleep, or somebody woke you up, or or something stressful happened during your daytime, and you're just all distracted, and there's lots of things that make it hard to go on the stage because you don't have your energy together and your focus in the way that you are, when you're at your best. And out of 8 shows a week, you might be best for 4 of them, and that's a good average.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it is a job. At the end of the day, it's a job. Just like people that work in an office do not want to go to the office every single day. There are days that they go, they go anyway because it's the job. It's a job. But I will leave you with what my dad used to say, because my dad was an insurance adjuster, in the business, he'd have to go and investigate claims and all that. And I'd like be complaining about something, and he said, "You know what? I got no sympathy for you. You know what? Every day I go to work, at the end of the day, not a person stands up and claps for me. Not even one." I go, "Well, all right then." Okay. Make a pretty good point.
Thank you so much.
Well,
That's
you're
great.
very welcome. Thank you for thinking of me. It's been fun to do. I really appreciate you thinking of me.
Have a wonderful evening.
Take care.
Same to you. Bye.
Behind the Mirror of Music with Dannii Cohen.